years since the Sovereign first opened Parliament. In the time since, Canada has dramatically changed, repatriating its constitution, achieving full independence, and witnessing immense growth. Canada has embraced its British, French, and Indigenous roots and become a bold, ambitious, innovative country that is bilingual, truly multicultural, and committed to reconciliation.
A clear overarching theme of today's speech from the throne and anticipation that preceded it, King Charles III expressing there the power of Canadian identity in the wake, of course, of Donald Trump's threats to our economy and sovereignty. Here to unpack the power of that pulpit at this specific moment in time is our front bench. With me tonight, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore. He's a senior advisor with Edelman. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is here, as is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie. Hi, everybody. Very nice to see you tonight on a pretty historic day. James, I know you weren't just industry minister. You were also, I remember many years at least a period of time that you were heritage minister. What did you think of the significance of the monarch delivering today's throne speech?
A historic moment, and there was an interesting choice that was made in terms of how the presentation happened. Normally, when throne speeches happen, the Governor General is sort of marched in. As there's a procession into the Senate chambers, and then to deliver the speech from the throne. But there was an interesting choice that was made to have His Majesty in the room and to have the Prime Ministers of Canada, including Mr. Carney, Mr. Harper, Mr. Trudeau, mingling around. And so the visuals that came out of the room were an interesting choice, and I think a very impactful one, because you saw the Sovereign, and you saw our prime ministers, you saw members of Parliament, justices of the Supreme Court, members of the Senate, members of the public who were also in the room, sort of commingling one another in a cross-partisan, sort of almost like an informal way before the formalities started. It showed a unity. It showed a togetherness and a cooperation of spirit of the moment, where Canada feels under threat, rallying around our king, rallying around our government, and a throne speech that was presented in a way that's different than others in the past. So I think in terms of the presentation and the physical images and the physical moment, I think it was an interesting choice, a wise choice, and I think a very impactful one.
Tom, as James was kind of describing that, I was thinking how last night, ahead of our special coverage this morning, I was, a bit cynical, to be honest, thinking, oh boy, is this really going to be all that it's touted to be? I have to say, in the moment, being there, the visuals were something. It's not just the visuals of the king himself, but the crowds, the sheer volume, the number of Canadians that came holding their flags, and exactly what James just pointed out, watching, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau, for example, laughing with each other and talking back and forth. There is a symbol or a significance to it, I think, that I don't even know I could have anticipated would have been the case just 24 hours ago.
I couldn't agree more. And when it's the king who comes, they can actually order up 24 hours of sunshine, which is something that we haven't seen in the wider Ottawa area in the past month. The images today were just resplendent. It was phenomenal pictures. And it does remind us, Vashi, that we are a strong, stable, prosperous constitutional monarchy. And you know what? Yes, we can all joke about the tricorn hats and the usher with the black rod and the carriage and everything else. But the constitutional monarchies of this world, start with Sweden or go through, Belgium or Netherlands or Great Britain or Canada or Australia. They do kind of well when you look at the ladder of countries that have stability and peace, order, and good government. And I think that's something we take for granted, and we shouldn't. Yes, a big discussion can take place, but I think about 30% of Canadians really find the monarchy important. So I don't know which political party is planning to form government by promising to get rid of it. So we'll continue to make the best use. And today, Carney made the best possible use. He had the king himself deliver the keynotes, and we'll discuss those details later on. But I thought overall, tremendous result and great work by Carney securing the presence of the monarch himself.
Yeah, sometimes, Rob, tradition can help inform our identity, and it definitely seemed like that was on full display today.
Yeah, I mean, this was a soft power flex for Canada, and I think and the audience of one at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is perhaps the most important audience. Not that Canadians should feel bad about feeling so good about their country today. I think they should be, but I think it's important that President Trump sees that Canada is a unified and united country. And I thought that I agree with you, Vashi, that the pictures of Prime Ministers Trudeau and Harper and Campbell speaking together from different parties showed that there is something more important than partisan politics, that there is a country, a sovereign country that cares deeply about its history and is proud of where it's at. We beat ourselves up a lot in this country, and we've seen some ups and downs over the last few years, and I think these extraordinary times demand moments like today, and I think we should all feel pretty good about being Canadian this afternoon.
That greater context, Brian, of the extraordinary time we find ourselves in is, of course, vis-a-vis the threats from the United States. I sort of had the sense during the speech and maybe all of it that surrounded it, that it ended up being less about a direct message, for example, to the U.S. president than a message to Canadians.
Yeah, I probably both at the same time, but for Canadians, for sure. And when you look at it really today, the medium was the message. It really was a way to implicitly, indirectly, however you want to say it, give the message that we are strong and free. And at times, maybe a little bit more direct than others with using that line, for example. But I think I agree with all the comments from my colleagues, and I think it was a very smart move to have him come. And the message that it sent was strong. I think the fact that we had so many people come out, I was a bit surprised by that, if I'm to be honest, if we're sort of sharing. I was shocked, actually, in the sense that some want to see the king, for sure, but you only had very limited moments to do that. And it really felt like people came out to support that implicit message, right? That message that we are indeed strong and free. And to James and Rob's point about the idea that we see former prime ministers of different parties mingling, the fact that we saw others, important leaders from other institutions. There's no better way, as Tom was pointing out, to sort of demonstrate your sovereignty, demonstrate who you are, than to hold dear your institutions that make your country work. So I think it was a phenomenal day for Canada, and I think it was very smart of the Carney government to allow this to happen. And frankly, I think the real best part about all of it was seeing so many Canadians come out to support that message. I thought that was pretty powerful and even at times emotional for us all.
The throne speech and the substance of that we're going to get into in a second, James. Like the domestic part of all of this was a big part of the speech, but there were parts that the king kind of inflected his own wording into, or his own reflections into, and in particular they were around whether we are indeed, as he said, the true north, strong and free, or around our unique national identity, some reflections on his mom. Did you think that those statements struck the right balance in addressing kind of the bigger story of what's happening with the United States and kind of the reason that this even came to be, while at the same time, like, I imagine the goal was not to further antagonize Donald Trump.
The subtlety of the language and the subtlety of the inflection in the imposition of the language are it's a very delicate thing, right? And so it's not just the choosing of the words, but it's how it's delivered and all that. And I think they actually did a pretty masterful job, because you can imagine if there was a little too much heat, a little too much aggression, and they crossed a line. I think they came right up to the line, stood at it, and then back to where it was appropriate. Because you can imagine if there was a little too much heat, right now you might have Ambassador Hillman or a minister of the government on Fox News debating Tucker Carlson or someone who's saying, oh yeah, if you're an independent country, then why did you need King Charles here to do that? So it was very well done. It was very, very well done. And I think what needed to be said was said. People who are sophisticated enough to know what wasn't said understand why what wasn't said. And I think there was a firm moment of solidarity across this country in French and in English, whether you're on the Conservative, Liberal, New Democrat, Green, doesn't matter team. This is a moment for Canada, for solidarity, and for expectation of unity. And I think that they did a masterful job of saying the right thing in the right tone in the right way. And there were a lot of ways that it could have been done wrong, and all of those ways were avoided.
Yeah, it's not hard to picture a scenario, Tom, in which Donald Trump is further antagonized and goes off. We've seen it actually happen in the Canada-U.S. relationship in recent months on a number of different occasions. The context has shifted a little bit, though, because there have been much, far fewer references to us as the 51st state. Let's say since that meeting in the Oval Office, there's been none compared to 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago. How do you think that informed ultimately the final product?
Or to Governor Carney, I like the way James put that. I think that if we looked like we needed our big brother fighting our fights for us in the schoolyard, it wouldn't have been good for us either. But it was just enough of a reference to Canada's sovereignty, to its independence. And to pick up on the words English and French, I have to tell you, I just did an hour French TV panel show, and the clips that we were able to use from King Charles III in French were impeccable, easily understood by anybody in the French-speaking world, and that was an added